So this training video is going to be about selling in a editorial radio interview story, sometimes known as a radio day, although I don't really like the term. We have a spokesperson in the studio in a few days' time. So this is a training video with a live example of how to have that conversation with a producer or a presenter or a newsreader, and they are slightly different. Okay, the way I would start this is to say you have to know what you're offering in terms of content, because every single radio station out there needs content, and sometimes they're going to get that content from their own sources. Sometimes they're going to take them from news wires, for example, like IRN or lots of different wires, PA, for example. So they can take the content from feeds, because if you're a regional radio station, you don't have a journalist in Westminster, for example. So you're going to take that feed, probably from Sky News, also known as IRN, and you're going to take their content and then package it for your audience. You might have a few local reporters doing local stories. So it's going to be a mixture of them sourcing local stories, but also taking the most relevant national stories from the feeds. Now, from our perspective, the key thing that makes it possible for us to do what we do is that Ofcom, which is the regulatory body for the broadcast industry, require all radio stations outside of national radio stations to have a certain proportion of local content. And the media companies themselves have the minimum amount of staff they can possibly get away with in terms of news and editorial content, because that doesn't make them any money. So there's been a trend of increased syndication and shared resources, and that gives us the opportunity that if we can give them interesting content that actually, and in particularly, is locally relevant to their audience, then we're helping them to do their job. So it is possible to look at what we do and say, right, we're pestering, we're annoying different producers and presenters, but that's only if we're doing it wrong. If we're giving them weak content, if we're giving them something that doesn't add value to their programming, that's exactly what we're doing. And that's why the emphasis has to be on creating the best possible content, forging good relationships, figuring out what content they actually need. And then when we have these conversations or these emails with them, presenting what we do as a help rather than a hindrance. And so long as it's done in that way, then it's a win for us because we get coverage for our clients. It's a win for them because they get interesting content that they didn't have to work that hard to source. And the audience also benefits because they get an interesting story that might help them solve a problem that they didn't even know they had. So the goal is to do it right from all aspects. But, and this is an anecdote that I'll share to highlight that you do need to have some kind of human interaction. And as far as I'm concerned, emails rarely are a human interaction. They're very impersonal. When I worked in the first radio station I worked at, called Chiltern FM, it's now branded as a Heart radio station, and it was a fairly big regional radio station because there was Classic Gold had their head office there. It covered 3 different counties, and as far as a local radio station was concerned, it was quite well staffed. There was about 30 people there. And the average regional radio station might have like 4 or 5 people, for example, and then presenters come in at different times of the day. So it was a fairly big radio station, had a bit of a buzz to it. And even the newsroom had about 5 different people in there. And I distinctly remember going into the newsroom, and there was 2 fax machines in this newsroom. And I started my career in the radio industry in the year, when was it? It was kind of early 2000, like late 1999, early kind of 2000, at the point where fax was still the dominant way that PR agencies would communicate with radio stations, and email was still there, but it was just kind of, it was the transition between the two. So there was 2 fax machines in this newsroom, and there was a fax machine that was hardly ever using, and then there was a fax machine that was whirring all the time. But the ridiculous thing about this fax machine is that it had a bin right under the fax machine. And there was a guy called Mike Jones at the time, and I remember speaking to Mike, and Mike was famous because He was the head of news when Chris Moyles was at Chiltern FM, and they had lots of kind of on-air interactions that were a bit frosty, a bit kind of thing. So Mike was quite well known, and I remember asking Mike, and I said, Mike, why the hell do you have a bin under a fax machine? And he just said it so kind of casually. It's like, oh, that's the PR fax. I said, PR fax? What do you mean? He's like, oh, yeah, we get pestered by PR agencies all the time, so we just give them that fax number. And I said, well, look, that's going to cost you ink, all that kind of stuff. Why do you give a number for a fax machine if it's just going to go into a bin? And they're like, oh, they're very persistent, these PR agencies. They don't take no for an answer. So we just give them something. We're not going to read it. We're not going to do anything. But it gets them off our back. And that was my first interaction of hearing how a fairly seasoned news person felt about standard PR people. And that is that they were giving them irrelevant content. They didn't know about the format of the show, and therefore they were seen as a hindrance. And I said, well, look, there must be the occasional good story. And he said, look, see if you can find one. See if you can find anything usable in that bin that would actually work for our show. And I remember flicking through, and there was one about trainers, and it's like, for images, call this number. So it's like, people were sending press releases for trainers, not aware of back then it was Radio Authority, now it's Ofcom, kind of commercial guidelines. They couldn't be overtly commercial on air. Offering images to a radio station made no sense. And I had to agree with Mike that it was rubbish. And that's why they had a rubbish bin under a fax machine, because the content wasn't right. So naturally, I knew that if a PR agency called a radio station, they're already on the back foot. There is already a breakdown of trust. There is a lack of appreciation that the PR agency might be able to help. And I said to Mike, I said, look, have they ever been able to help? And he's like, well, if they have something really, really local, we'll consider it. And if they have a celebrity, then we tend to let the presenters know, because sometimes they like celebrities on air. And that was it, celebrity or localness. And that kind of stuck with me. And then when I created Independent Media News, I created Independent Media News on the basis that Independent Media News sounded a lot like independent radio news. So if I called a reception, and back then I was a one-man band, but if I called a reception and said, I'm calling from IMN or Independent Media News, the receptionist would just assume it's independent radio news and put me straight through to the exact person that I would need to speak to. So it was a little bit of kind of guerrilla marketing in the sense that by sounding similar to a other content provider to newsrooms, I managed to have conversations with the right kind of people. And if I accidentally spoke to someone in the sales room, they would immediately put me through to the newsroom because it sounded like that's the right person I needed to speak to. So that definitely helped. But for me, what I learned very early on is that if you're not giving them the type of usable content, then you're not helping at all. And over time, I created, Connor, you'll be familiar with Matto,
yes.
As a kind of an acronym to help us create value for clients, because you don't want to pester brands any more than you want to pester radio presenters. But the acronym for radio presenters and producers, I used to call it Triple S. Okay, so that's story, spokesperson, and stats. So Triple S is still useful than not having any framework to think about, but it evolved to STAR, but spelt different. So SSTR. So the first S is the story, and there's two main different types of stories. Is it a news story or is it a feature story? And you need to know the difference, because the key difference, if it's a news story, you want to mainly be speaking to news editors and broadcast journalists. If it's a feature, you want to be speaking to radio presenters and producers. So already, you could easily make a mistake by, if you've got something really, really newsworthy and you're trying to speak to a radio presenter, that's not really the kind of the lifestyle content that they might be interested in. Equally, if you've got a feature where someone's giving tips and advice on how to do this to a newsroom, then you're not speaking their language. Immediately, they're going to be on the kind of this kind of feeling of, well, this isn't for me, and you don't really know who you're talking to. So the first S is story, and for a news story, the more newsworthy it is, then the more likely you are to get coverage. And what determines how newsworthy is what is the hook, what is the top line, what makes it a story, and Obviously, there's certain things that can be more newsworthy than other things, but you've got to lead with the top line, because if you've got a great story, but you're not going to bring that up until sentence number 5, they've already lost interest before you get to reveal. So the top line is because it should be the top line of a press release, or it should be the top line of an email, or verbally, the first sentence that you actually say is the top line. It literally means the top thing that you say. So that's the S for story. Second S is spokesperson. In radio, a lot of the content comes through a radio presenter, actually interviewing some kind of guest. And in my experience, there are 3 main types of spokespeople. And the memory tool here to help with this is that they all end in ITY. Okay, so you have your celebrity, your personality, or your authority. Okay, and in many ways, they're all designed to be either relevant or credible in their own way. So if, and we've had a few celebrities in the studio over the years, radio stations like having celebrity guests on there, because it feels like something special is happening on the show. So we've had Olympic gold medalists, we've had TV presenters, sports presenters, TV doctors, all this kind of stuff. So celebrities can help, okay, if they are a genuine celebrity. The second is personalities. So personalities quite often are experts in a particular area. So, your classic TV doctor, for example, might not be a celebrity. You might not recognize them on the street, but they're kind of known as, that's that guy with, the tan who's always on kind of breakfast television talking about like medical stuff. So you can have personalities. I would say, for example, that if there's a recent, apprentice candidate, for example, Dragon's Den person, or let's say a Love Island winner, for example, they're definitely not celebrities, but you could put them in the personality category, and that can help depending on the relevancy. And then you've got your authorities. Now, your authorities, generally, the key thing that differentiates them is their credentials, their credibility. So if you have, for example, a nutritionist, a dietitian, in this case, an optician, they have authority, they have credibility, and that makes them more interesting. So the first S is a story. Is it newsy? Is it featurey? The second S is spokesperson. And is that spokesperson an authority, a celebrity, or a personality? And if they are, then that's going to help with the story. Generally, news stories require more authorities or people with credibility, and features require more celebrities or personalities. So that's the clue as to if you're planning a campaign. When does a celebrity really make sense? When you don't have a news story, and when you have something. And I'll give you an example. So there is a fairly not very well known now, but she was known at the time, a TV presenter and a model and a reality TV star called Mylene Klass. And she was a mum, and she had a range of clothing for mother care. And the story that we created was multitasking mums. There are mums out there that are raising children, running businesses, creating books and TV shows and designing clothes and all this kind of stuff. And we even broke down the demands on mums regionally, so we would have some local relevance to the story, and we didn't need it. We literally called up radio stations. We said, we've got Mylene Klass available on Mother's Day, and they're like, right, we'll take it. And they couldn't care less. And some of them would say, well, what's she plugging? And it's kind of like, well, she's designed a range of baby clothes at Mother Care, but she's not going to talk too much about it. Is that okay? Yeah, not a problem. And it was easy. And we had the Chinese celebrity chef Ken Hom in the studio on Chinese New Year. And it was super easy to have the story, because you had someone famous and relevant, and the timing was right. And that's why in the acronym SSTR, star, the T represents timing. So there's 2 key things that give time relevance. One is either the if I look at those examples, for example, having a story relevant to mums on Mother's Day, or obviously the working day before Mother's Day, that's relevant. Having a Chinese chef on air on Chinese New Year, that has time relevancy. But if you just called up a radio presenter and you said, we've got Ken Hom available, oh, that's interesting. Okay, we've got Ken Hom available on the day before Chinese New Year. Suddenly that content is more appealing because it has time relevancy. Now, if you don't have a platform or a time hook, or what's known as a peg, then essentially quite often new research can be the reason that you've got timeliness to the story. So in this case, for the Association of British Dispensing Opticians, what makes it timely is that there is a brand new survey, brand new research has been released that hasn't been seen before. So that's what gives it timeliness. So you would need to make that clear that this isn't old data, this is brand new stuff that has never been revealed. That's what gives it timeliness. And then the R, so SSTR, S story, second S spokesperson, T timing, and then R is relevancy. And the reason why I changed it from triple S, so story, spokesperson, stats, is because you can create relevancy in a non-statistic way. You can create relevancy by having a local spokesperson or a local case study. You can create relevancy based on, we used to do a lot of work with Boots, and their head office would be in Nottingham. So I would make that reference whenever I called a Nottingham radio station. It has to be relevant to them, either locally relevant or it could be age relevancy. I remember doing a campaign around pensions and cruise holidays, completely different campaigns, and it was really appealing to those radio stations that had an older demographic. So it doesn't have to be locally relevant. Another example of relevancy that isn't regional would be a campaign that we did for a financial services company that specialized in the LGBTQ community. And the team was struggling, and they said, like, how do we make this more relevancy? Because there was only like a couple of gay radio stations. And I said, right, and I went on Wikipedia and I put gay cities, and Wikipedia came up and it had a list of the top 10 cities that either had gay districts or whatever it is. And then suddenly the media team could then go to those areas and say, right, Manchester is one of the top 10 cities with a higher than average gay population, and we've got one of the leading gay activists talking about how the traditional financial services company doesn't cater for the LGBTQ community. Well, then suddenly they're in a bit of an arm lock. We've told them that it's relevant for their audience based on our own research, and we've got someone relevant for that particular topic. And then, of course, their ability to consider that went up massively. We also did a campaign with an Italian chef called Gennaro Contaldo. I think he's not the most well-known Italian chef, but he's still known. He has TV shows and that kind of stuff. And it was a campaign for Bertolli, and it was talking about kind of Italian ingredients in foods and that kind of stuff. And again, we just looked at which regions or towns in the UK had a higher Italian either first or second generation population, and then it became relevant from that. In a lot of what we do, though, we have regional research we polled 2,000 people, and then we have the statistics broken down regionally. And if you make it relevant to their audience, rather than saying a new survey shows that 25% of Brits feel this way, but you say, right, in your particular area, let's say we're talking Yorkshire, in Yorkshire, you have a higher than average percentage of people that feel whatever it is, and you lead with the top line, but with local relevancy. You're going to get much more traction and interaction because you're giving them something that is potentially usable, rather than just pitching a story because you want the coverage. And if I would give one bit of advice, I would say the way that is the best way of thinking about this is that you are helping them in some way to have more interesting and relevant content, but it may or may not be right for them. And sometimes people have this fear of rejection. It's kind of like, oh, well, I could offer a story, and then they'll say no. And it's kind of like, well, look, think about it. If you offered a story about dementia, for example, to let's think of a radio station that has a young demographic like Kiss 100 in London, for example. Now, if you spoke to someone there, let's say you got through to a producer for the breakfast show, and you said, right, we've got a spokesperson talking about the ways in which the children of people with dementia can help them to lead more independent lives. Well, the average children of people with dementia are going to be in their 40s or 50s. And the target audience for Kiss 100 is between 15 and 24. That's the target audience. It's going to be a slightly broader audience in terms of who actually listens, but they're targeting teenagers. why would a station like Kiss 100 even consider a story like that? It just isn't relevant for them. So again, this idea that the story may or may not be useful is a way to defend against rejection, because we don't know if this is right for you or not. But hey, look, we've got local stats and we've got this and we've got that. What do you think? And then pay attention to what they say. It could be, yeah, this sounds good, or not really sure. All the information they're going to give you is through the thinking noises more so than the words. You know, if they're like, let's send it over. Okay, you may as well not bother, because they've already rejected it. If they're like, okay, seems interesting, like send it over, that means something entirely different. So the clue is what they're communicating in terms of the response to the story, and then it becomes about getting commitment. So Connor, if I give you an example of this. So with a story like this one, for example, a new survey from the Association of British Dispensing Opticians. Now, you could abbreviate that to ABDO, but I wouldn't. Because if you say a new survey from ABDO has highlighted a worrying lack of knowledge, well, who is ABDO? And if they have to kind of figure it out, you've already lost them. So a new survey from the Association of British Dispensing Opticians has highlighted a worrying lack of knowledge from some parents regarding children's eye health. In fact, 1 in 3 parents think their kids should have their eyes tested for the first time when they start school. And 1 in 7 parents actually surveyed believe that the children need to be at least 5 years old before they can have their eyes tested. This is a worrying lack of knowledge, and if parents don't know, then potentially they could be making poor decisions when it comes to their children's eye health. Obviously, we've got a spokesperson available to talk about this before children go back to school. So they're actually available in the studio next Thursday. So by giving them a sense of what the story is about, they're going to get an overall sense of, could we use this or not? Okay. And in 99 times out of 100, outside of like the hardcore regs that will pretty much say yes to any kind of interesting content, you're going to get the response, send me an email. Okay. And that is to be embraced. When they say send me an email, excellent. Yeah, who's the best person to send it to? And you want to get individual email accounts rather than general news at, blah, 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 fm.co.uk. And when they ask for that email, there's a couple of things that you can do to filter out, and it's really about filtering out, are they asking the email to fob you off and get you off the phone, or are they asking for the email to actually consider this potential spokesperson as someone that could be on air? Now, if we look at the SSTR, I would generally open a call with, hi, it's Adam from Independent Media News. And then I would obviously try and speak to the right person. So, who is it that's producing the mid-morning show? Who is it that's the news editor there? Are they available? And then when you've got them on the phone, I'll say, look, hi, it's Adam from Independent Media News. We've got a spokesperson available on Thursday morning next week. And they're talking about the fact that within your location, 1 in 3 parents actually think that their kids should have their eyes tested before they start school. And it's actually the Association of the British Dispensing Opticians that have done brand new research. And we've got a leading dispensing optician available to talk about that. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is I'm giving it relevance to timing. I'm giving it relevance to that we have a spokesperson, that they have credentials, and that there is something interesting about the story that they can consider. And then they're going to say, look, send me an email. Great. Would I send that to yourself or someone else in the team? Oh, look, just send it to news at blah, blah, blah. Look, more than happy to do that. My only fear is that Daryl Newsom, who is the leading dispensing optician that's actually behind this research, is only literally available. He's come up from Devon, and he's only available for 3 hours on the morning of Thursday next week. And I'd hate to send the email, you look at it, you like the story, but it's no longer there. Just out of interest, if you did like the story, would it be you or would it be someone else doing the interview? Now, that's an important question, because you want to have any follow-on communication or emails to the actual person that's going to consider it. And you might be speaking to a broadcast journalist and you need to speak to the news editor. Or you might be speaking to a producer that isn't producing on the day of the show. So would it be you? Would it be someone else? And at that point, you've got an opportunity to either elaborate on the story or figure out what process they would need to go through. So the way that I would do it is when they ask for an email, I would then say, well, look, more than happy to do it. I'd just be worried that they're not available on by the point that you tend to respond. And by the way, we've got quite good regional information on this, because in your specific area, you're higher than average at the number of parents that are ignorant about when is the ideal timing for kids to get their eyes tested, which might make it a more interesting story. And then listen, okay, right. And by the way, would it be you or would it be someone else? Like, if you were to do this interview? Oh, no, it would be me. Okay, and just out of interest, would that be live or would that be pre-recorded? Now, the reason why you're asking would it be live or would it be pre-recorded is because if it needs to be live, then the scarcity of the time becomes even more important. Because if they're like, oh no, it would be live. Let's say you're calling a BBC regional radio station, yeah, much prefer live. Okay, well, realistically, they're only in the studio between 9 o'clock and about 12 o'clock. Would before or after 10:30 suit you better? Now, the reason why you split the middle of the schedule is because you've doubled the scarcity by saying, would it be before or after that? And let's say they say before, and you can say, well, look, as things stand, we do have a 9:15 available, but also a 9:45. But I don't know if either of those times would even work for you. And here's the key thing. At this point, they're shifting their focus from your phone conversation to their diary, to their calendar. Every radio station has a way of planning what is on the show. They have a schedule. So you want their focus to be on the schedule rather than on you. While it's on you, they're only ever going to ask for an email. And then there is a disconnect between them considering the content and being the place to consider that content. So you need to get them focused on the very thing they would use to consider it. So at that point, they're then looking at the schedule and they're saying, oh, okay, 9:15 we could do. Okay, and would that be over the phone or would that be by ISDN? Just if you were to do it, and emphasize the if, because it's all hypothetical at this point. Probably would be on the ISDN line. Okay, great. So just to confirm when I send this email, if you like the story, it would be you doing a live interview. 9:15 is possible. I'm more than happy to send this email, but I'm just thinking, as things stand, it'd be really frustrating if we kind of know that that's possible, but by the time you respond to the email, it isn't there. Would you like me to pencil that in? And then if you don't like what's on the email, you can always cancel it and just say, no, not for us. How does that sound? Well, they've already got the schedule in front of them. And if you've created enough value in the localness of the story, the credentials of the spokesperson, the interesting in the news hook, quite often they just say yes on the phone. And when I started out, I had no experience in this, but there was a lot of pressure because I would have 5K, 6K budgets. It would just be me. I'd have like a day or two to get the thing. And what you realize is that you've got to make a lot of calls. You've got to accept that a lot of people aren't going to be interested. You're going to get a lot of people fobbing you off. Oh, just send me an email. And if you let the kind of the no's and the kind of the fob offs affect you, you're screwed. Okay, the game doesn't become winnable, because at the point where you do have a conversation, if you are jaded and kind of, your enthusiasm is sapped because of the people that weren't interested in the story anyway, at the point where someone could be interested, well then it's already an own goal. There's no way in the world that you're going to get that kind of content placed. So for me, what I would do is I would make like literally calls, and I would make non-stop calls. This is the crucial thing. I would make non-stop calls between 5 past and 5 to. And then at the 10 minutes on the hour, if I wanted a tea, if I needed the toilet, or if I needed to send emails, that 10-minute window is when I would do it. And this is really for commercial newsrooms. Producers, it's slightly different. But I would make non-stop calls. So I'd have 50 minutes of calling and then 10 minutes of kind of doing admin and that kind of stuff. Because what can happen, it can be a trap where you have a call, they send an email, you send an individual email that is identical to that one thing, and then all day you're kind of stopping and starting, and it's fucking ridiculous. Make 50 minutes worth of calls. You can cover a lot of ground. Send all your emails in one go, because you just have to change the stat or the regional mention in the subject line. And then also what I would do is I would try and get as much commitment from them. So my track record, depending on the story, was between every 5 and 10 conversations with a presenter, producer, or broadcast journalist, I'd get a booking. Well, the key thing is, like, if you can get 2 or 3 bookings in an hour, well, you can hit a schedule in a day, okay? But if you're only having, let's say, 3 or 4 conversations in an hour, really tricky. Sometimes I'd have 25 conversations in an hour because they don't last very long sometimes. And if they do, it's probably because they've interested and you've got that commitment. So the key thing is you've got to make the game winnable is really my key tip. And the way to make it winnable is give them engaging, interesting content that helps them with their programming objectives for their audience, and I would say customize the what you say to help them. If you're calling a BBC regional radio station, generally you want to speak to more producers, less newsrooms. If you're calling commercial radio stations, more newsrooms. And the other tip that I would give, I would say, is really pay attention to their tonality, rhythm, and pace. So, like, if I, and you've got to be a bit of a chameleon here, because if I called, let's say, I don't know, a BBC regional radio station, and it's a producer, if they answer the phone and, hello, I know I've got way more time to play with than if like news. If they like news, I'm like, right, I need to distill this in like 20 seconds. It's Adam at IMN. We've got a spokesperson available next Thursday talking about the fact that in your area, this. Send me an email. Would love to. Just hate for you to see that it's no longer available. And actually, we've got quite good local information on this to give you an idea. This percent of parents feel this way. How does that sound? Something you're receptive to? Look, maybe just drop me an email. Okay, I will do. Okay, you're not going to try and keep them on the phone. Would it be you? Would it be someone else? If, however, you speak to someone and their tonality is more, oh, hello, newsroom. Okay, you've got more time. And you say, oh, hi, it's Adam from Independent Media News. How's your day going today? It's going, good, thanks. Yeah, how's yours? Not bad. Listen, we've got a spokesperson available next Thursday talking about the fact that brand new research released by the Association of the British Dispensing Opticians actually highlights that there is a worrying level of ignorance in parents, and that particularly applies to your region. Oh, you've got regional information. We do, yeah. A survey of 2,000 people, and actually within your area, 33% of parents actually feel that a child should only have an eye test when they actually know how to read. Bit worrying, but we've got the Association of British Dispensing Opticians and actually a leading optician able to talk about that, but he's only available for a few hours on Thursday morning. How does that sound? Oh, right, can you send me an email? Yeah, quite happy to. What's the best email address? Oh, okay, fine. Just worried, though, that by the time you get the email, we might not have any availability left. Would it be you or would it be someone else? Oh, right, would be you. Okay, fine. And generally speaking, would that be live or would that be pre-recorded? And you go through this herding process. And then sooner or later, if you've built rapport, if you've generated their interest in a story, if you've made it super easy for them to look at their schedule, they know they've got availability, this is a good story, it kind of fits with their audience, guess what? You do the reverse close and you say, well, look, obviously you're going to need to consider this, but why don't we block out that time? We'll get you in the diary for the time that you can do, let's say 9:15. And once you receive the email, if you don't like it, let us know, and then we'll free up that time slot. But at least you're considering something that's actually available. It'd be frustrating for you to invest time to consider something that's not even there. How does that sound? Okay, that sounds good. And then you mirror everything back. So we've got these booking forms that we would say, right, who the presenter is, or who the actual kind of interviewer is, who's the emergency contact or a second contact like a producer. Is it going to be phone or is it ISDN? And if it's ISDN, what codec is it, like a G722 or an aptX? There's just different things that we would be able to evaluate so that we've got all the information that we need to actually connect, if that makes sense. So the key thing is you've got to make it engaging, and you've got to get to the point. It's not the time for waffle. And some of the times, and this is more kind of high level stuff, but there were certain producers and news editors that I knew I had a bit of a relationship with, bit of a rapport with, and I would try and set a trap for them. And the trap is I would, if it was a story like this, for example, and there's a particular newsreader who used to be, and this radio station doesn't exist now. It's branded as Smooth, but back then it was kind of Saga in the West Midlands. And I would always set her a trap, and the trap would be, if it was a story like this, I'd say, oh, hello, like, how's your day going? Oh, good, thanks. Like, how's yours? Not bad. By the way, are you a parent? Are you a mum? It's kind of like, yeah, I am actually. And it's kind of like, well, what age do you think is the earliest that a child should go to have their eyes tested? It's like, wow, I don't know, like 2 or 3. So you're one of the smart ones. because 33% of people in your area think that they should only have an eye test when they actually start going to school and in fact learn to read. That's a worrying lack of ignorance. And we've got one of the leading opticians from the actual trade body, the Association of British Dispensing Opticians, that can reveal the level of ignorance and what parents need to do about that. Don't know if that's of interest. It's like it's verbal aikido. You got them in a fucking arm lock, but you've got to get the buy-in. You can only do that. And I remember having that approach. And then, I started off this thing and she's like, Adam, now's not a good time. My tone completely shifted. Completely get that. I'll call back later. In fact, what I'll do, I'll just drop you an email summarizing the story. Okay. So at the point where she needed time, I gave her the time, made the call super short, like 10 seconds long. At the point where I could tell from her tonality that actually she got a bit more time, then you can play a little bit gamesmanship and kind of build the rapport and kind of be a bit more chatty about it. But the key thing is you have to have what's known as sensory acuity. Pay attention to what's going along and then respond accordingly. If someone's like, news, okay, you get straight to the point and your tonality reflects their tonality. If it's kind of like, evening show, it's kind of like, Verulam FM, it's kind of, oh, hello there, kind of mimic the voice a little bit and kind of build the rapport, and then you've got more time to really build the value up. But at the end of the day, it's about closing. It's about getting those bookings, as Phil quite rightly said. And the way that you do that is you get them interested in the story. You create scarcity of the availability of that spokesperson. And you kind of use it's kind of like it's the now or never close. Well, we this is the first time we've ever had this optician and the spokesperson. We don't know if he's going to come in again. And actually, he's only available now because it's coming up to Scottish kids going back to school. And actually, some of the research reveals that actually for a lot of parents, there's ignorance about when children should have actually kind of, have their eyes tested for the first time. Thought this might be relevant. So you just got to play the lay of the land. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, cool. Any questions at all? Or
no, to be honest, I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Cool, done. All right, well, we'll leave it there.